tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I have a heart that's beating like a million beats per minute right now.
Justice for Amanda Todd. The Coquitlam teen's cyberbully is sentenced, and her parents have a message. Plus, 15 years after the death of a Polish immigrant at YVR, a look at how the Robert Jakanski case is still going.
Definitely one thing that I would want to be at the top of a candidates list too.
And why some key election issues were somewhat left off the table in the campaign.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. Tonight, the parents of Amanda Todd say they finally have justice. The man who spent years tormenting their teenage daughter online before her suicide has been sentenced to 13 years in prison. Now, that's more than what prosecutors had asked for in a case that made headlines around the world. Tonight, Lindsay Duncombe looks at what it all means for Todd's family.
A decade almost to the day since Carol Todd's 15-year-old daughter killed herself, a sentence more than the grieving mother had hoped for.
This will make a difference in the world for the kids, and I have to hope that Amanda's watching from somewhere to see what her voice did for everyone.
Amanda Todd shared her story with the world in a heartbreaking online video posted shortly before her death, alerting so many to the horrors of cyberbullying on the internet. The torment began when Todd was just 12. That's when a Dutchman, Aiden Coban, shared a topless photo of the child with her contacts. Using several aliases, Coban spent 2 years exploiting the teenager, forcing her to participate in online sex acts and then posting the images. In August, Coban was convicted of extortion, harassment, communication with a young person to commit a sexual offense, and possession and distribution of child pornography. Justice Martha Devlin's sentence, 13 years in total, was a year more than the Crown had requested. She told the court he did cause profound harm that contributed to her mental health issues, depression, and substance use. Ruining Amanda's life was Mr. Coban's goal, and sadly, one that he achieved. This sentence is scheduled to begin after Coban finishes a Dutch sentence for similar crimes. The 44-year-old has 2 years left on an 11-year sentence in the Netherlands for similar offenses against 33 young girls, some as young as 9. Todd's family doesn't want any other family to endure this kind of loss.
So we all have to learn from this.
I just miss her, and I hope she sees we got her some justice.
As for where Coban will serve his sentence, under the extradition agreement with the Netherlands, he has 45 days to be returned to his home country. Once that happens, as the family understands it, a judge will evaluate today's sentence and determine how much time he will serve in his home country. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, New Westminster.
Parts of BC are experiencing level 5 drought conditions. It's the most severe level on the province's classification scale. This is Alouette Lake in Maple Ridge, where the water level has significantly decreased. The province says areas on level 5 include the Lower Mainland, East and West Vancouver Island, and the Sunshine Coast. These images are just stunning. Now, the drought could have severe economic and environmental impact in these areas. BC Hydro says drought conditions in the province have left some of its reservoirs at near record low levels. Well, wildfire broke out near Cypress Falls Park in West Vancouver today. It happened at around 7 this morning at the top of the Caulfield neighborhood on the lower slopes of the park. It's not clear of the exact location of the blaze, but officials say it's a wooded area that is not believed to be close to any homes or businesses. Crews from West Vancouver Fire and BC Wildfire Service are responding, along with 3 helicopters. Smoke from the fire could be seen across much of Vancouver.
We had estimated the fire to be approximately 2 hectares in size. Once again, that is a very early estimate. We will have to wait till we are on the ground and see what's happening to get an accurate estimate of the size of that fire.
The cause of the fire is still unknown. Let's go now to meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe. And Joe, two stories that are really just kind of mind-boggling that we're seeing both of these things at this time of year.
Yeah, Anita, it is exceptional. We're running out of words for how historic this really is. This weekend we will see some of the latest, hottest temperatures ever on record for parts of British Columbia. And the heat and the drought are interplaying with each other. The drought is adding to the heat conditions, and in turn, that heat continues to draw the moisture from the soil. So it is a bit of a positive feedback loop, I'm afraid. I want to show you something else, another trickle-down effect from the heat and the dry conditions. As you mentioned, the fires, air quality advisory now expanded into Metro Vancouver. Just about an hour ago, it's expanded from Eastern Fraser Valley right through to all of Metro Vancouver. That is through the weekend. We are expecting slightly warmer temperatures and a bit of a southerly flow. That will mean hazy skies, poor air quality, and if you are at risk, respiratory illness risk, then you might want to think about reducing activities outdoors, maybe even staying inside and getting some, keeping that outdoor air outdoors. We're also looking to see more records fall, as I mentioned, Abbotsford, but daily temperature records have just been crashing. Yesterday, we saw 21 daily high records fall. I've just been adding them up, over 20 today as well. And Anita, this is before that big push this weekend. We could be approaching 30 degrees across parts of the province. And as you said, that's all playing into the exceptional drought we have across the province. But I'll tell you about the rain that I do have in the forecast coming up in a bit.
Okay, because 30 degrees is just unbelievable, Joe.
It's insane.
Okay.
Yeah, it's true.
Talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Well, election night is right around the corner. It's tomorrow, in fact, and new municipal governments are set to be elected across the province, including in Lytton, the town that burned down in last year's wildfires. Now, for many residents casting a ballot, it's a long trip to vote in a town that's been changed forever. This year's election is a battle about the future of the town and the pace of reconstruction. Benoit Ferradini visited Lytton this week.
Lytton is still a construction site 16 months after the fire. The ruins that were still visible in June have been finally taken away. With the skeletons of the village gone, all that remains are holes in the ground and little sign of a rebuild.
It's been 16 months, and everybody there sit on their living room and say, why? Why can't I go back?
That's the question for all three candidates running for town mayor. Denise O'Connor's house burned to the ground, and she had to go live in her childhood home above the town. She is a former school principal, and she helped run the Resiliency Center after the fire.
I'm not campaigning on, improving health or improving transit or improving those kinds of things that we might in a typical election. Until we find out what's going on, we just couldn't make promises.
The three candidates agree on one thing. The outgoing mayor and council have not communicated enough with the residents.
I think I stand out in this mayoral race from them just because I won't put up with the things that they might politely put up with.
At 31 years old, Willie Nelson is the youngest running in this election. He wants to be known as a man of action, ready to help rebuild the town with natural materials.
I'm going to continue on building this village hall, and so whoever wins will have, hopefully a 12-foot diameter space that 4 councillors and a mayor can sit down, and they don't have to drive all the way to Kamloops to have their village meetings.
The third candidate is Edith Loring Kuhanga. She says she is the best qualified for the job. She is the only candidate running who is Indigenous and has been a Lytton resident for 5 years.
We're at such a critical point right now. This is probably one of the most important elections that Lytton will ever have. So it's critical that we elect people who are ready to jump in and get on with the job.
The reconstruction of Lytton makes this election very complicated. The majority of the residents lost their homes and are still living outside the village, sometimes a long ways away.
I actually knew it would be very, very challenging with the fact that the residents are almost all of them are displaced all around BC.
Despite that, turnout is high. During one day of advance voting, 70 residents came to Lytton to cast their vote. That was unprecedented.
I know people, they're coming from US, they're coming from Kamloops, and that's a 2-3 hour drive just to come and vote, to make sure that they have the right to vote.
The new mayor and council will have to hit the ground running, with big decisions to make that will shape the community for the years to come. Benoit Ferradini, Radio Canada, Lytton.
And throughout the province, there have been a number of top issues that resonate no matter what city you're in. Crime, housing affordability. But what about transportation? As Brady Strachan reports, some political observers say the issue has been absent from many campaigns and discussions.
Whether it's commuting to work or riding an electric scooter to the gym, a municipality's transportation network affects the daily life of nearly every resident.
Transportation in general is a critical element for a city because it's closely related to the economic growth of a city. For example, it provides an option, a means to travel, to work, to move goods between point A and B. It's also closely related to the quality of life of people.
Fatmi says the people voted into municipal office this election will play a major part in shaping their community's future transportation priorities. Everything from approving new roadways and bike lanes to expanding public transit and bringing in alternative ways of getting around, like bike share or e-scooter programs. It's also tied to issues of reducing a city's climate footprint.
In Canada, around 25% of the GHG emissions comes from transportation. So it is a pretty important component to design, plan, and live in a sustainable city.
So, with voters heading to the poll, how do transportation and sustainability rank on candidates' lists of campaign priorities? Some political observers say they're not that prominent, often taking a backseat to other topics that dominate the political discussion.
I think there's some campaigns I've seen are more explicitly focused on crime, homelessness, while others are a little more broader about the housing context generally, unaffordability.
Crime and homelessness are visible issues in many communities. He says that makes it an easy target for political challengers to highlight when trying to beat out incumbents. For voters who rely on public transit, though, it's a different story.
For me, this is one thing that is provided by the city that I do notice in my everyday life.
I need to get to work. I need to get to certain places. I need to do things that I wouldn't be able to do, without transit.
Definitely one thing that I would want to be at the top of a candidate's list too.
A sentiment many other voters may also be thinking as they cast their ballots. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
Let's go now to what's happening in BC's fastest growing large city, Surrey. It's one of the front runners there is City Councillor Brenda Locke, and one of her biggest promises is to keep the RCMP in that city. But as Yasmin Gandam reports, stopping the transition to the Surrey Police is easier said than done.
City Councillor Brenda Locke has big plans if she becomes mayor, stopping the transition from the RCMP to a municipal police force, something her party, Surrey Connect, says will save the city big bucks.
It will cost us over $521 million over 4 years. This city can't afford it. Our residents can't afford it, and clearly our residents don't want it.
Locke is currently leading the polls at 24%, with incumbent Mayor Doug McCallum trailing behind her at 19%. Back in the 2018 election, McCallum campaigned on the promise of bringing in a municipal force, a pricey commitment that is well on its way.
I absolutely will not participate in any part of the transition. We will stop it immediately. I will immediately let the Solicitor General know that it is off the table for Surrey, and I will also let Ottawa know we are sticking with the RCMP. I will not sign off on this transition.
But according to political experts, reversing it is not that simple.
To completely unwind all of that, that process would itself be quite expensive, and ultimately would require a provincial approval to essentially undo what's already been done.
And others agree it would be a complicated process.
Anything that's done in a meaningful way
such as changing police forces, has to be done only with the approval of the provincial solicitor general. So Surrey would have to then go to the province and say, this is what we want.
In an email to CBC, the Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General says the minister's approval is required and decisions are subject to RCMP agreements and federal government policies. Locke is the only mayoral candidate who has publicly committed to keeping the RCMP in Surrey, and if things go her way, Locke says officers hired under the Surrey Police Service would be transferred to their previous agency or join the Surrey RCMP. Yasmin Cantim, CBC News, Surrey.
Okay, a bit of a primer there for you on some of the issues around the province, but let's dive even deeper with none other than our municipal affairs reporter, Justin McElroy. Justin, big day tomorrow. What can we expect election night to look like?
Yeah, 160 different municipalities across British Columbia, each with their own races, each being counted by their own city halls, not Election BC. So things can be a little bit different depending on where you are. But we do have a general sense of what the timeline will look like across the province. Polls close at 8 p.m. no matter where you are. That's a given. Then the election results, we'll start to see trickle in around 8:30 or so. Could be a little bit earlier, could be a bit later. And, we should know the overall winners by about 10 p.m. or so if everything goes according to plan. Of course, people might remember 4 years ago, Vancouver was so close, determined by just 950 votes. It wasn't until about 11:30 at night that we knew there. However, this is going to start the numbers fast and furious when they do come in. It's going to be a hectic 2 hours or so, and a lot of city halls are going to look very different at the end of the night.
Okay, and we could be in for a late night. Surrey, Vancouver are the big races we're watching. We've talked about this, but of course, there's a whole lot more to this province, isn't there?
Oh, just a little bit, and we're going to be showing you the results in places far and wide across the province, but there are places we'll be focusing a little bit more on. One of them, of course, is Victoria, the capital city, arguably the third most important when it comes to sort of the political calculus of the province, though not necessarily by population, as you can see. Housing and crime, big issues, and the two main candidates for mayor, it's two councillors, Marianne Alto and Stephen Andrew. Alto, a longtime councillor. Andrew got elected in a by-election just 2 years ago. Really a referendum on whether to continue with the ideas and philosophy of Mayor Lisa Helps, who is stepping down. That's the Alto candidate, or Stephen Andrew, who has talked more about municipalities focusing on core issues. And of course, we're going to be looking at places in Metro Vancouver as well. Port Moody is one of them. It may not be that big, but in terms of the campaigning, it's been fierce, it's been negative, it's been a bit nasty. A lot of debate over ethics, but also growth, development. They have two SkyTrain stations, a lot of arguments over exactly what should be built, how big towers should be. The two candidates there, also it's a battle of councillors. Also, it's a question of continuing in the path that the previous mayor has been. Steve Milani supporting the policies of outgoing Mayor Rob Bagramoff, Megan Lottie being more on the pro-growth and development side of things, being a fierce critic of Bagramoff over the last 4 years. And we're going to be looking throughout the interior as well. There are a lot of interesting races, but Kamloops might be the most interesting of them. Obviously, one of the biggest cities in the province, particularly when you get out of the Lower Mainland. Another place where crime is a big issue, more of it in the downtown core that have been seen before, and you have a lot of candidates running for mayor that have a chance. 3 of them are sitting councillors. You can see them right there, Dieter Duty, Satish Hunter, and Arjun Singh, all 3 of them with a lot of experience at City Hall. But you also have 2 other candidates who have ran more populist campaigns talking about crime, have hoped to run an insurgency sort of for people that are fed up in City Hall and Kamloops. Those are just 3 of the races we're going to be following. Results, like I said, going to be coming fast and furious for about 2 hours. It's going to be interesting to see what stories come out of different municipalities at the end of Saturday night.
I'm sure you'll be ready to rock and roll, Justin. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita.
On election night, be sure to tune in to CBC Vancouver for our live special on TV, radio, and online. We'll have in-depth analysis and up-to-the-minute coverage results across the province. Reporters will bring you the latest news live from candidate headquarters. It all starts at 7 p.m. tomorrow and will continue throughout the evening. Well, the province is handing over $50 million in funding for the new Vancouver Art Gallery building.
The Vancouver Art Gallery is a flagship cultural institution here in BC. It's an icon that is beloved by many residents, and it's a must-see tourist attraction.
Inside the new building at Canby and West Georgia, there will be a theater, a library, and research center and artist studios, as well as an Indigenous community space and classrooms for specialized programming. Back in 2008, the province invested $50 million into the project, bringing the new total to $100 million.
Artists are the reason for our existence. They are at the center of everything we do. The new Chan Center for the Visual Arts will be a home for artists, but also a home for all our communities.
You heard it there. The new building will be named the Vancouver Art Gallery's Chan Center for the Visual Arts. Its facade was designed through collaboration with Coast Salish artists. Work on the new gallery will begin within the next year, and it's set to open in 2027. It's been 15 years since Robert Chikansky was tasered and died at YVR. Why the story and the case continues to this day, coming up. Housing, safety, transportation, and climate change. What do the next 4 years look like? Who will win, and what will it mean for you and your family? Tune in to CBC News for in-depth analysis and context. Join me this Saturday as CBC News presents BC Votes, live commercial-free coverage of the municipal election starting at 7 p.m. Until then, get up to speed at cbc.ca/BC Votes. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. She's too young to drive a car, but Hayley Bland is not too young to race at tracks around the Maritimes. This 14-year-old cleaned up in her rookie season. She won 10 races. Take a look.
No license, no problem for Hayley Bland. I've hooked her up with a camera at Scotia Speed World. One thing Hayley learned in her rookie racing season:
I like the speed. I like to go really fast, and I like to compete against others.
no one could have predicted she would burn up the track the way she has. Matter of fact, painted on her Bandolero racing car, her nickname, Wild Child, given to her during early practice runs because, well, she was wild on the track.
So in this corner, I'd go over the curb, that's the white bit right there, and it messed up my line coming up here. And then I went too close to the wall, which is very dangerous. And then coming into that turn, I did it wrong, which made me, when I came out of turn 2, I'd go over the curb again, which would actually break my spindles. And then I'd go too close to the wall.
Once she figured out how to hold the line, she won her first race, then 9 more wins followed. I'm in the chase vehicle with Scotia Speed World's Tim Terry. We're trying to catch Hayley. How good is she?
She's won 10 races this year. It's hard to gauge a beginner, but I think once she moves up, she's done well against the Outlaws in Fredericton. She's done well against the Outlaws in PEI. I think she's got it.
Okay, so
back at her home, her bedroom bookcase is full of the trophies she's won this year.
This one is my last race that I did. Another car spun out right in front of me and smashed into me.
Not your fault.
No.
And in their massive garage set up for tuning and fixing race cars, Hayley's dad, Doug, is teaching her race car mechanics 101.
Each track has a different setup for it. So.
Oh, yeah.
Now, he's a good racer himself, but this year, he was Hayley's pit crew boss. Now he wears number 27 on his back, which is Hayley's racing number. Here at the track, he gives his daughter a push out of the pits.
Not really nervous at all anymore. We get more nervous if there's going to be any wrecks or accidents, how many repairs I'm going to have to do before the next heat. Very cool. That's the whole reason I got both my girls into racing was so her mother and I will feel more comfortable when they're driving a car on the main roads, that we'll know how they know how to handle the car.
Hayley's about 2 years away from being able to legally drive on the roads. For now, she's content going around the oval. Fast, very fast. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Enfield.
Today marks 15 years since Robert Jakanski died at Vancouver International Airport from the actions of the RCMP. In 2007, Jakanski, a Polish immigrant, died after he was stunned multiple times with a taser by police. Since then, there's been a public inquiry, multiple lawsuits, perjury cases against the Mounties involved. That all ended 5 years ago, but still, the story continues to unfold. Kurt Petrovich has been reporting on this story since the day Jakanski died. He joins me now to look at the ongoing criminal investigation that could be the last chapter. Kurt, before getting into that investigation, for those who aren't familiar with the story, can you remind us, give us some background?
Absolutely, Anita. Robert Jakanski was a 40-year-old Polish immigrant. He'd arrived at Vancouver's International Airport on this day 15 years ago. To this day, we still don't know why or how he managed to be in the area where all the passengers arrived for something like 10 hours before he was processed. He came out in the early hours of the morning. He didn't speak English. He became erratic. He started to throw and damage furniture and airport equipment. The RCMP were called. They arrived. They attempted to communicate with him. They directed him to put his hands on a nearby counter. He swung around. He had a stapler in one hand, and the RCMP immediately used a taser. They deployed it 5 times. It took a couple of officers, regardless, to get him into handcuffs, and a short while later, even after paramedics were called, Robert Jakanski died. There was an inquiry. It was largely based and provoked by the video that was shot of this whole incident by a bystander. And the inquiry commissioner, Thomas Braidwood, concluded, among other things, that he thought the 4 officers were unbelievable in their explanations for some of the mistakes they made in recounting what happened. Ultimately, based on that, a special prosecutor leveled charges of perjury against all 4. 2 of them were convicted. Kwesi Millington, who fired the taser that night, he was sentenced to 30 months in prison. Monty Robinson, the corporal who was in charge that night, he was sentenced to 2 years less a day. But Bill Bentley and Jerry Rundle were both acquitted, and they continue to work for the RCMP today.
Yeah, it really has played out over a number of years. So what is left to know? What's happening now?
Well, Jerry Rundle and Monty Robinson, over the last number of years, used access to information laws to try to dig into the RCMP's files on this case, and they discovered that the RCMP had withheld a number of documents that they believe would have helped their case insofar as it demonstrated that those officers, all of them, had acted completely within their training. They took those findings to an assistant commissioner of the RCMP who opened criminal files, and those criminal files were turned over to the OPP a little over 2 years ago, which has been investigating ever since. I spoke to Monty Robinson earlier this week and talked to him about where things are going. And he told me, you know, one of the things he hopes that might come out of this investigation is enough information that would prompt the federal justice minister to issue a pardon in his case. But in any event, he told me, he just isn't going to be able to get back the last 15 years of his life.
I've been sober now for, it'll be 11 years next March. I found a lot, because they broke me. Make no mistake about it, they broke me. All these people are putting out that false narrative and withholding documents that vindicate you. And to get the first ever criminal investigation, took overwhelming evidence and finding the right person to do their job. It's just not about having evidence, because the RCMP just doesn't resist change. It obstructs change.
So what are the other 3 saying about this potential investigation?
Kwesi Millington and Bill Bentley both declined to talk to me. They say they want to put this in their past. So does Jerry Rundle, but he says from the day that Robert Jakanski died, he hasn't been able to. He still has nightmares about it. He told me that he's not sure that any one document that they might obtain would have made much of a difference. But one of the things he's hoping that comes from this investigation has to do with Braidwood's findings, because the RCMP didn't just adopt them, they embedded them in the RCMP's de-escalation training for all of its members. And Jerry Rundle is not against de-escalation training, but he is haunted by the fact that there is this report that calls him a liar and he's been acquitted. And he would like to see that report taken out of the RCMP's training.
It's like the be-all, end-all of de-escalation training, and he's been put up on this pedestal within the RCMP organization, and he doesn't belong there. And that report doesn't belong there. And, you know, with OPP and what they hopefully will find, I've been fighting to get that report removed from training because it doesn't belong there, in my opinion.
This really is extremely complicated, Kurt. So when can we actually expect the results of this investigation?
Who knows? It's been going for more than 2 years now, you know, longer than it takes to investigate some murders. I do know that the investigative team has been to British Columbia half a dozen times over that period. They've collected dozens of statements. It's just a matter of time before they issue their report and we find out what they've discovered.
Kurt Petrovich reporting for us tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Political leaders in China are gathering to hold their National Party Congress. The View from Canada is next.
And as you know, some people were not very happy with the size of the print on the ballots. So this year we're using an entirely different system.
The small ballot on the left was the type used in the last civic election, and more than a few of them were spoiled and the count of the results was delayed. This time, however, Vancouver voters will be using this much bigger ballot. The names on this facsimile are fictitious, but it gives a pretty good idea of what a Vancouverite will face on November 19th, Election Day. You don't use an X in marking the ballot, but rather connect two arrows located beside the name of your candidate selection. In the past, if you spoiled a ballot, it stayed spoiled. But the beauty of the new system is that it rejects a spoiled ballot on the spot.
That ballot comes back, and when it comes back, a message is given out, and the message says, "Not voted, return to voter for review."
So the voter has a chance to fill it out correctly and then feed it back to the machine. It should be a lot easier for voters when it comes to deciding which of the 77 candidates they'll choose to fill the 27 civic positions at stake. And it should speed up the election night returns.
We hope so. We're saying 11 o'clock, but we hope that it might be a little earlier, but we won't make any promises.
The city clerk says that any citizen who failed to get on the voters list this time around need not worry. You can do that at your polling place on November 19th. And she says there'll be plenty of staff there to help out. Terry Dolan, CBC News, Vancouver City Hall.
only happens every 5 years. Political leaders in China are gathering to hold their National Congress. Now, China has gone through a lot in the last 5 years. COVID fallout, the ongoing tensions with Taiwan, and economic turmoil are sure to dominate. Bernice Chan has more on what's being talked about and how it might impact us.
The 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China has kicked off in Beijing. It's a twice-a-decade meeting where the top leaders are chosen. This year's event could have big repercussions for Canada. Here's what you need to know. The Chinese Communist Party has over 96 million members. They will ratify all major decisions of the party and policy. They will also decide who will be in the Central Committee and the Politburo Standing Committee, both of which make major policy decisions. The most powerful member is the General Secretary of the party, Chair of the Military Commission and President Xi Jinping. He is 69 years old, but at this Congress he intends to extend his leadership for at least another 5 years, which is unprecedented. While extending his leadership will be smooth sailing, there are choppy waves ahead for Xi with domestic and global challenges, with major implications for Canada-China relations. During the COVID-19 pandemic, China took the zero-COVID route. Parts or entire cities have been locked down, with armies of people in hazmat suits testing residents daily. These disruptions have hit China's economy hard. In 2022, China projected its GDP to be 5.5%. Now the World Bank has said it will be 2.8%. This week's Congress will indicate how Xi intends to get the economy back on track, as foreign companies, including those in Canada, pivot away from China's supply chain and look elsewhere to produce items from toys to steel. Another issue is the recent release of the UN report on Uyghurs that said China has committed serious human rights violations that may constitute crimes against humanity.
This is the first time that a UN High Commission for Human Rights has said that China, despite long history of human rights abuse, this is the first time it's saying that they may have committed crimes against humanity, and that's a really serious allegation.
The U.S. has already begun banning imports from Xinjiang, presumed to be made with forced labor. Uyghur activists believe Canada should follow suit.
So I think what we really need to see is something similar to what the U.S. has done, which is a presumption of the fact that forced labor is widespread in Xinjiang. Xinjiang is the source of 85% of Chinese cotton, around 20% of the world's supply. So if you find textiles that are made in China, it's very likely that they come from the Uyghur region. So I think for all of those reasons, we should have a much stronger stance when it comes to our moral and ethical culpability in supporting forced labor.
Meanwhile, in August, military tensions in the Taiwan Strait increased during U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit. It renewed China's ongoing insistence of reunification with Taiwan, which it regards as a renegade province. Xi Jinping has said he does not rule out the use of force to reunify with Taiwan, which has the self-governing island on edge. Canada has shown its support for Taiwan when a group of Canadian parliamentarians recently visited the island during its National Day celebrations.
We are worried that after Xi Jinping consolidated his power after the Party Congress, he will try to isolate Taiwan in international society in economic front, diplomatic front, and military ways to coerce Taiwan, the government, and the people.
But economically, China and Taiwan are inextricably linked. China is Taiwan's largest trading partner, while China's second largest imports at 13% come from Taiwan, from agricultural products to semiconductor chips. However, China is carefully learning from the Russian invasion of Ukraine in its strategy to take back Taiwan.
They know that they have to strike very hard, very rapidly, and then to organize a blockade, because it's easier for allies, NATO allies, to resupply Ukraine, because there is a NATO country that is the neighbor of Ukraine. In the case of Taiwan, it's an island.
Two key upcoming elections may very well determine China's course of action.
Well, the first is the elections in Taiwan in January 2024. They will do their utmost to get the Kuomintang elected and to get rid of the like of Mrs. Tsai. The other thing that they will be watching is the U.S. presidential elections in November 2024, because if someone like Donald Trump or someone similar were to take power, I think that China may feel emboldened to attack Taiwan.
The next few years ahead will be challenging domestically for Xi as he continues China's tough zero-COVID policy and tries to jumpstart the flagging economy. While increased tensions between China and the U.S. and China's threat of taking back Taiwan militarily is risky for countries, including Canada, we may see shifts in Canadian diplomacy to prepare for these possible scenarios. Bernice Chan, CBC News.
An undercover CBC Marketplace investigation is exposing a growing problem in this country. Some networks of brokers and real estate agents committing mortgage fraud for a fee. It's putting would-be homeowners at risk. David Common shows us the pitch and the price buyers could pay.
So here's the mic.
Marketplace sent this undercover team to investigate mortgage fraud. What they found was real estate agents illegally offering fake documents to help buyers fraudulently qualify for a mortgage.
Income is not issue because income he can make. They will make T4. They will make like he's on the payroll.
They're pitching fake jobs and fake salaries, charging buyers thousands of dollars. If these deals go through, the agents would make big commissions. The buyers could be in jeopardy.
If you are making $0, even if you are a housewife, we can make the income.
That's what they charge 1% of the mortgage.
So they charge 1%
of the mortgage.
There's nothing gray area about it. It is absolutely fraud. Wow.
Mortgage agent Sanjit Mann says he hears about fraudulent operators all the time. He says new immigrants are often the target and have the most to lose if they buy a house they can't afford.
If you get blacklisted by the banks, well, now think about this. You're building a life here in a new country. You're blacklisted by the banks. What's that going to mean for the rest of your life?
At this house, bought for $1 million, these newcomers were told by their agent not to seek mortgage pre-approval, that he had a plan.
He can do any paperwork and make us qualify for more mortgage.
When they refused his fraudulent approach, they lost the house and their $40,000 deposit.
It's been tough. It's been really tough.
Mortgage fraud can have lifelong consequences. It is a criminal offense. Pushing someone else to use fake documents is illegal too. The regulator says it will investigate evidence of wrongdoing, but it does not conduct undercover tests, as our team did. David Common, CBC News, Brampton, Ontario.
Coming up, the creative ways people are finding to survive the affordability crisis. We look at co-housing next. rising cost of living in BC is continuing to put a strain on many renters and homeowners in this province. As Janella Hamilton reports, here in Vancouver, some are coming up with creative solutions to the growing affordability crisis.
Oh, very good. Wow. 2 carrots.
Ashley Pullman loves spending time in her backyard, a space she shares with this family.
When we were thinking of buying a spot, it was like an apartment was kind of within our reach. And then I said, okay, well, what if we try maybe just for a year to explore co-ownership?
Through Coho, BC, the two families were introduced. Together, they bought this duplex in East Vancouver, a house both families say they would not have been able to afford otherwise.
The taxes, the insurance, you pay it together.
Over the past few years, this real estate expert says more people across the province are choosing to live collectively.
Young families taking advantage of it to reduce childcare costs by bringing friends or family or other young families where they can kind of take care of each other. You can reduce transportation costs, certainly by living in neighborhoods that are closer to work, closer to shopping.
Annika Vervecken is a single mom living in Vancouver's Strathcona neighborhood. She says day-to-day living costs are becoming more challenging.
Just recently, it's been really, prices have really gone up, and we buy everything organic.
To help reduce financial strain, she's created a collective housing model, a home and lifestyle shared by multiple people.
There is no way that I could afford to live in this neighborhood, a 20-minute walk from work downtown, in a house that has a garage and a garden.
In addition to rent, the housemates share the cost of groceries.
We just buy all the food together and we eat it together, and that sense of sharing is really important for me.
There's also like major social benefits. So all these toys you see are toys that our kids share.
Pullman is calling on government to recognize and support those who are choosing alternative ways to live together, to provide incentives that allow even more people to find another way of making ends meet. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. I'm trying to figure out if you're outside or inside because you don't have a jacket on, but I'm like, okay, it's because it's not cold.
Yeah, that's October 14th, 2022 for you. It is, a little on the chilly side. If we went a couple more hours, I might grab the jacket. But a reminder that when we do feel that chillness in the morning, those diurnal swings, name of my new band, by the way, Diurnal Swings, really ramping up this time of the year because our nights are getting so much longer. It's not really the name of my band. It's just such a great name. Sunrise 7:32 and sunset 6:25. So the sun has set, and we're going to continue to see those chilly mornings, even with the warm, actually hot forecast we have. Okay, I want to show you something on the satellite and radar that is not the West Coast. This is the East Coast right now. This might ring a bell. What you are looking at is an atmospheric river that's hitting parts of eastern Canada right now, pushing into the Maritimes. They're looking to get 100 millimeters over 24 hours. That is what we should be getting this time of the year. This is our rainy season. We normally see 7 to 12 atmospheric rivers, some of them obviously much more severe than others, the one hitting the East Coast on the lower end, but this is how we get most of our moisture in the fall and the winter. So it was such a stark contrast for me to see that atmospheric river on the other side of the country, and they do get them occasionally, just not like us. 18 right now in Abbotsford. You may add another 10 to 12 degrees on your forecast for this weekend. And here's YVR trend. Climbing through the weekend, and then a bit of a cold front will drop things to the high teens for early next week, but then still well above our seasonal of about 14 for this time of the year. So the rain is getting directed up towards the northwest, but notice that stream of moisture does hit the coast for Monday. That's that cold front I talked about. It runs into our high pressure system, so not bringing much moisture, if any, into the south coast. And then that high pressure sticks around for most of next week. You can see sort of the province divided in half by that cloud band as Pacific systems really try and break through our ridge of high pressure. I don't think that will happen until next Saturday. but I have now seen the rain in the Saturday forecast models for a few days now, so higher confidence that it will happen. Look at those extraordinary temperatures as we head into Sunday. That's where we may hit 30 degrees in parts of the Fraser Valley. Temperatures all 10 to 15 degrees above seasonal. Take a look at the forecast for Vancouver for the next 5-7 days, coming down Monday, Tuesday. Also, just a reminder that we are looking at that wildfire smoke for this weekend. Hopefully, Anita, that gets swept out for Monday. And then there we go. A hint Friday into Saturday of our first substantial rain, and I will definitely keep us posted.
All right, that is important for sure. Thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
It's a remote island off the coast of New Brunswick, but it brings in tourists looking for that salty taste of dulse. The Drought of seaweed is next.
It felt like everyone else had been given an instruction manual on how to be a person, but I didn't get a copy.
To be spoken to as if I'm 5 years old.
Treat me like a human, I guess. I am human.
I am what's considered late diagnosed for an autistic person because most autistic people will receive a diagnosis in childhood.
I got diagnosed in March of 2021, so I'm still pretty new to it.
5 p.m. you can come and just hang out.
I think for me, it was, when you get your diagnosis and you want to connect with other people and you don't have that opportunity, you don't have that soft place to land, it was really isolating. So one of my motivation to be able to create these networks of people, the peer support group, or to get involved in the community more of autistic people was for other folks to not have that experience I've had in being isolated. The Neurodivergent Collective of New Brunswick is a group that started organically by myself to be able to connect neurodivergent people. So those are autistic people, for example, where the peer support group is located as a community, as well as other groups. So some of the other groups that are part of this collective would be the queer neuroqueers. So that's for neurodivergent people that are also 2S LGBTQIA+. That's part of the collective, and a collective really is just for what we like to refer to mutual aid support or collective care. So we're a community of people that share an identity or identities where we come together in order to be able to support each other.
If the government and if workplaces were both aware of neurodivergency and accepting of accommodations and sensory needs, then that would go a huge way to dealing with the terrible unemployment rates for neurodivergent folks.
I always hope to share how proud I feel of being autistic, of our autistic community, that we do indeed exist.
Would love it if they would just treat us as capable, intelligent human beings. Just because we express things in a slightly different manner than the rest of society doesn't mean that we aren't capable and passionate and interested.
Although it is difficult to have challenges in a world that's built for non-autistic people, we have our own unique traits and insights and ways to navigate the world pretty creatively, I'd say. And so I want them to understand that message that, yeah, we are pretty cool people.
Edible seaweed is big money in New Brunswick. People there have been harvesting them for decades in an activity known as dulsing. But with rising temperatures, residents say the large fronds of dulse that have made their way onto one of the province's islands and made them famous may not be as easy to find in the future.
This is just the top rock, so there's not a very big area, really. See, on a really big tide, that would drain out there quite a ways further. Back in the 50s and 60s, if you was Dulcin, you would stay right out here in a little camp with your whole family and cats and dogs and everything and go Dulcin, and you dry your Dulce right on the Dark Harbor seawall. It was a community, you know, a small community when people were out here Dulcin. You would even sell your Dulce. There was buyers right here on the seawall that would buy your Dulce, so you didn't have to go home for anything. I find it easier than a lot of other jobs, I really do, and I don't go at it as hard as I used to. I would be satisfied with £20 for one tide. I mean, those other guys, they get 60 and 70.
My name is Sandy Flagg, and I am the owner, part owner, my wife owns part of it, and operator of Rolling Sea Vegetables. I buy it and package it and sell it. The first of the season, the Dulce is really scarce. Through the winter, we have these storms, and it rolls the rocks upside down, and it takes a while for it to regrow. The Dulcin's a big business, but it's only summertime, seasonal. You gotta have the heat from the sun to dry it. We get people that call us, and they were thinking about coming to the island if we had Dulce. If we didn't have Dulce, they'd go to PEI or Nova Scotia, but they want to come down and make a trip of it, especially if we have Dulce. Oh, there's a big demand for it. It's a health food now. And all the other products, your nori and moss and sea lettuce, that's a health food, and they go for that. Some people like it and some people don't. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't want nothing to do with it. People call it a luxury, but people say, I need it.
Some years are good and some are bad. The Dulce grows better some years than it does others. This year it grew fairly well, I guess. Most people think it's hard work, but actually, most people that do it love it, though.
It is quite delicious, I have to say. I've even got my toddler to get into the seaweed. Nori, a little bit easier to find here in Vancouver than Dulce, though. All right, that is it for our show. We hope to see you here tomorrow for our election coverage. It all starts at 7 p.m. on CBC Vancouver News. Here on television, we'll also be on radio, and we're streaming online. Have a great weekend.